This is something that affects opportunities to provide that are currently being provided or that would be provided to 350,000 homeschool students around the state, including 3 of my kids that are still in school. And I just think that is more, the 350,000, that is more kids than in all private schools combined. It is something that, you know, for those of you who are not used to homeschools, they don't, you know, a lot of times we don't think about them, but literally there are more homeschoolers in the state of Texas than all private schools combined. This opportunity affects a lot of people. What the bill does simply is ends UIL's prohibition against homeschool student participation. And while it's named the Tim Tebow bill after the famous quarterback who was homeschooled but was allowed to play football in Florida, if you're wondering where that came from, it's more likely this should be called the Tim Tebow law, because I think more often than not this is going to be used for other types of UIL activity more often than having a football player or basketball player, that kind of thing. Members, I believe this is good policy. One last thing I will say, when you look at the number of students we have homeschooling and how much it costs to educate, homeschoolers are saving the state of Texas about $3 billion a year. The ones that are actually doing a good job in educating the way, they are saving the state about $3 billion a year. $350,000, $10,000 a kid. It's a pretty good deal. What we're asking for in this bill, we're saying, okay, we're going to handle the vast majority of this. We would just like to use one little part of the service.
Chairman, members of the committee, my name is Jeremy Newman, Policy Director with the Texas Homeschool Coalition. Rather than rehashing a lot of issues that you've heard, I want to try and go through and kind of hit on a lot of specific things that have been brought up, just to clarify some of the points. From the beginning of the testimony, I want to clarify that the rules that are in the bill were recommended to us by UIL for the best way to establish rules that work for homeschoolers to be equal to the rules that work for public school students. And we actually had a college recruiter who was going to come testify today to kind of explain the fact that in the homeschool leagues that we're talking about, the opportunity to be recruited by a college is not there the same way that it is in UIL, because they simply don't look at those leagues, at least not to the same degree that they look at UIL leagues. And I want to point out the fact that this has actually been mentioned before, but we're really talking mostly about situations where the family either does not have the ability to pay for these opportunities, or they live in an area where they're simply not available. In fact, as Andy just pointed out, there are some opportunities out there, but the fact remains that there are not opportunities for everyone. That is what this bill is trying to solve. The comment was also made earlier that HSLDA, a national organization, opposed the bill. The reason they opposed the bill actually had nothing to do with whether or not they thought it would increase regulation, because actually their research nationally is the predominant research showing that there has never been regulation increase. Their issue is that they simply don't like the idea of a standardized test in order to gauge eligibility for sports. And I'll also point out that it's not accurate to say that...
Jeremy, let me stop you real quick, because I don't want to lose this train of thought at this late of hour. The group association is what that you just mentioned? What is it?
HSLDA, Homeschool Legal Defense Association. They're a national Virginia-based organization.
There was an acronym I didn't get. Okay, so, and they have said, what the hell was I going to say? They said that they're against it because of the testing, right? So, are you aware of them supporting anything like in Florida or someplace else where there isn't testing and there isn't that mechanism for allow? Is there anything that's out there that they would support?
Yeah, so there are actually bills that have passed a number of other states that they either supported or were neutral on. In fact, there was a bill in Virginia, which is their home state, that includes a testing requirement that they were neutral on. So they kind of have an inconsistent history of what their exact position is on this issue.
Do you know what they've supported along the way? I mean, is there a bill out there that you could point to, or something that you could point to show what they've supported?
Their typical position has been neutral because they don't want to be engaged in the controversy.
They don't want to cross, because you got some that don't like it,
exactly.
Some that do like. So they just want to give you the facts. Okay.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Okay.
So the comment was made earlier that all of the states that allow this are more heavily regulated than Texas, which is not true. But depending on which states you group together, 5 to 7 of them have as little regulation. Some argue less regulation than Texas does, and they have UIL access and have for a long time. And then the issue was raised about whether or not the testing requirement was fair, which is kind of interesting to me, because some people from the public school side say that it has to be there to be fair, and now some people from the homeschool side think that it's not fair to have it in there. The reason that it's in there is because for a public school student, the teacher does not control eligibility during the first 6 weeks. That's determined by whether or not the student has made regular grade advancement, which is linked in many cases to their STAR testing. And so the point of the assessment is to mimic that requirement for the public school students and say that, as well as for homeschoolers, the teacher is not the one that controls eligibility during the first 6 weeks. You prove prior grade advancement by having this national assessment. And the point I would make to there is that if someone doesn't like that assessment, they don't take it. They don't participate. But we've had a bunch of people come up here to explain that they would like to participate, and that should be their choice. The 4-H issue was raised earlier. I'll just point out that 4-H and TMA, Texas Music Educators Association, they were both mentioned. They're separate organizations from UIL. They are not controlled by UIL rules. 4-H has a public statement out there explaining that this does not affect them and that they wouldn't intend to change their rules as a result, because obviously they don't even follow UIL rules completely because they allow homeschool participation. UIL does not. So there are a couple other things that I would mention, but I know I'm out of time.
You're out of time. How about that? You got a backup plan. Jeremy, I appreciate you hanging with us tonight.